The first thing I want to ask is, it takes effort to do anything. It takes effort to lift weights. It takes effort to do things. So to follow the type of lifestyle that some of you recommend, a lot of people are saying, yeah, I'm sure it would be good for me, but it takes a lot of effort. So what is the promise of all this? You know, in other words, a lot of people are saying, I got a father who's 86. I got an aunt who's 88. So why would someone want to go through the trouble of eating a whole food plant-based diet and ideally a raw food plant-based diet? What are you offering them? What's the great offer here compared to the regular life that people are living? What's so special about a raw food diet? What do you get out of it? What's the benefit to make all this effort?
Well, we'll start by putting the foundation down that we share this extraordinary planet with about 9 million known species. Now, as I suggested yesterday, I don't know this to be a fact, but I've read many times that we think we're destroying or killing about 35 species a day we've not yet identified. But one thing that I can tell you about 100% of the 9 million species we've identified is they all completely survive and thrive on a raw food diet. The only species on the planet Earth that choose to eat a cooked food diet is a human species. Now, I know anthropology, which I debunked yesterday with the latest in anthropology, tell you that our brains evolved when we began to cook food. It's not biologically possible for that to happen. As an example, when you cook something, how is it going to make something grow? That I debunked today in my lecture. So the premise of what you are doing, you are plugging in to the energy source that was meant to allow the biochemistry of your body, the anatomy of your body to flourish, to thrive, to work at the highest level. And the second little caveat I want to put with this is that I think it's at a point now we've so lowered the bar. If we're alive at 80 years old or 90 years old, we think, well, that's great. But how are we alive? Are we functioning? Are we happy? Are we productive? Are we healthy? Are we contributing? And just to be alive and taking up space and breathing, at least to me, is not that interesting. And I've watched so many thousands and thousands of people over the decades I've done this, not only heal catastrophic disease and prevent aging as Anna Marie and I have, but in fact become incredibly important members of their family, their culture, their society. And that's what we should be looking for today. Not just to be happy we're not dying.
We live longer, yeah. In many ways, you know, if you look at the birth death at the birth in old days, a lot of times we lost children because of the hygiene in hospitals. But we have better hygiene now, although a lot of people get sick in hospitals too. The thing is, we are sicker than ever. So we're looking at, it takes 3 generations to recover our human species. It really is going to take. So what we're looking at is people, like Steve says, my aunt is 80, my grandpa is 90. Yeah, and probably they came from generations that had not been eating as much processed food as our young generation has. So we're going to pay a huge price, and it will take probably 1 more generation before we see it as extreme. And we will have to, all of us, go holistic, and not only because our natural resources are dwindling, and you know, water is extreme thing that, you know, I was brought up on a peninsula outside Stockholm, and just realized that water is so precious. And we had to, in my home, we had to use water like it was gold. And most people think that water, it comes out of a tap and there's tons of it. All it is dirty water. It's very, very, you know, dirty water. It's not pure water that has been cleaned through the underwater veins. you have underground veins that cleans water, and it takes years and years for it to be pure and come into a well, for example. And most people just don't realize that I can use it as much as I want, and it's going somewhere, and then my sewer will be mixed probably with the water. We purify sewer water, and it will come back. How much do you think of amoebas and bacteria will come back into your system? So we have to start slow down how we use water. We will have to preserve it. And of course, there's places in the world where they don't have it at all. And they could teach us a lot about the precious water. But it takes generations to see what we have done. So what we see today, we might look around and say, well, you know, these people are so much older and they've done well, but we are sicker than ever. And this is the time that we have to realize that everything that you do matters. If you can be an example to your family by changing, they're going to remember that. They're going to remember that you took that step and chose to take care of yourself and chose to not just waste the natural resources that we have. And so that makes a big sense for us now to talk about today too. I think because we're thinking of our own body very much, but we have to take care of all of nature to have a healthy body.
And I'll just add that, you know, the question you asked, Steve, was really, what is the promise of all of this to people that are thinking of making this kind of change? And to me, the promise is I think of myself, I've been doing this about 30 years, and in all honesty, and not to brag or anything, but I still weigh the same as I did when I got married 40 years ago. I can still run as fast, I can still do a handstand, I can still do the splits, I'm not on any medications. I feel like I'm still 25 physically. That's the promise. You know, my relatives that are living the standard Western way, they're on 12 medications already at my age. They can't walk up the mountain. I'm running up the mountain. You know, and this is really the promise, is that we live every day to the fullest until we're, you know, at very advanced age. And you look at the blue zones, I am so in awe of, I can remember being at Loma Linda doing a few lectures there at the last conference I was at. And I can still remember a friend of mine, Dr. Scharfenberg. You may know Dr. Scharfenberg. He walked out of church on Sabbath. And I saw him and I said, Dr. Scharfenberg, is that you? And I hadn't seen him for years. I think at that point he was either 89 or 90. He was walking like a 25-year-old so briskly out of that church. And when he came over to me to talk to me, he said, have you seen the latest debates on sodium? And you know, there's one camp that's saying this and one camp. And he started, you know, talking about all this research. And then I said, you know, what are you doing these days? Oh, he said, I'm still speaking all over Europe, and I'm doing. And to me, that's the promise, is you reach these ages and you're still functioning. You're still contributing. You're still enjoying life. And I mean, that's what we all want. It's incredible.
Thank you. Audience question, anyone? Go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I just recently realized I'm not taking any, like, I thought, like, by having chia seeds and hemp seeds that would cover the omega-3. And I have a 40-year-old vegan daughter who, one of my Christmas presents was this liquid, but it has, like, coconut. It's got, like, sweeteners in it, and I don't really like that. I don't do well with it. So I was wondering if Hippocrates, the vitamins that you sell, Life Give, because I use them, if you have any form of a real, or you could recommend a really good omega-3 that has DHA and EPA. Thank you.
Well, number one, you have to look at where DHA comes from. So the whole industry that has convinced the public about the benefit of fish oil and completely fabricated stories that fish oil were the only ones broken down to a usable form for humans. It's completely bonkers. Fish get the DHA from sea vegetables. So there are forms that you can get on the internet and purchase the sea algae DHA, the same place the fish gets it from. Just no difference from eating a cow or eating the grass that the cow gets the protein from. It's the same exact, it's an aquatic version of the same thing. We've been using for 3 years and doing in-house observations of an extraordinary land-based product called nature sage oil. It's a clary sage, a unique form, a desert form from the Mediterranean and grows, of course, in the Middle East, that is phenomenal. The profile is phenomenal, and what I like about that the most, the perishability is very, very low. So it can sit around on a shelf without refrigeration for a minimum of 2 years. They think 3, 4 years. They've only done the test up to 2 at this point. And we see that to be fulfilling. So, of course,
Is that DHA and EPA?
Yes. So the diet itself, a living food diet, provides lots of omega oils. The difficulty is you can get too many 6 if you don't watch it. You can eat nuts, et cetera, that have too many 6. But what you have to understand is the algae oil is the #1 thing to do for if you're not eating a raw food diet, if you're not eating a living food diet, if you're not taking sprouts that have it in it. My strong advice is to take both. Take the nature sage oil, take the algae oil. And what's the name of the company that we talked about?
Nutru, N-U-T-R-U. They make Omegazen, which is a algae oil.
Megazen Nutra. Yes.
Nutru, N-U-T-R-U, Nutru.com.
I wanted to add something, but I'm trying to remember what it was. When you're thinking about DHA and EPA and the need for those things is just to remember that in the human body, so when you consume flax or chia or hemp, or walnuts for that matter, they contain what we call the parent omega-3 fatty acid, alpha-linolenic acid. And your body has some capacity to convert that into EPA and DHA, which are the more biologically active long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. And these fatty acids, the active forms are so important because EPA, for example, goes to forming a variety of what we call eicosanoids, like prostaglandins and prostacyclins and leukotrienes and thromboxanes. And EPA and DHA also go to forming these things called resolvins and protectins that are highly anti-inflammatory. And so these long-chain omega-3s are actually really important for the sort of the flexibility and functioning of our cell membranes and our brains and our, we need this stuff. And what we know is that conversion is fairly slow and certain things can slow it down. So for example, Brian mentioned that sort of the omega-6 is getting too many. It can actually reduce conversion because the omega-6s and omega-3s compete for the same desaturase enzyme. So there's a process of desaturation and elongation. And so when you get too many omega-6s, it depresses the omega-3 conversion. But even malnutrition, if you're not getting enough nutrients, if you drink alcohol, if you eat trans fatty acids, these all depress conversion enzymes. And so one of the things we want to do is to maximize conversion. But even if we're doing everything right, there are things that can make conversion difficult. If you, if you come from a fish-eating culture, sometimes you don't make as many of the enzymes. So it's not a bad idea to get some of the direct sources that we're talking about, the EPA and DHA directly. And one of the things to know is fish. This is the point I wanted to make. Fish, when you consume fish oil, you can imagine how much fish has to be harvested or killed to produce a bottle of fish oil. And so we're literally raping the oceans to produce these massive quantities of fish oil. And one of the things that we don't have a lot of research on, but there's some suggestions that starting in about 2010, we started to see what we called the fish oil failures. And there were several studies that showed, for example, the GISSI trial that showed fish oil helped to reduce sudden cardiac death by whatever percent it was way back when, taking a gram of fish oil a day. Well, following these people for another 5 years, they found absolutely no advantage taking fish oil. There was a whole bunch of other studies as well. Now, one of the possible reasons, and just to think about this, when you take fish oil, you're often taking about a gram or 1,000 milligrams or 2. And one of the problems with that is these are the most highly unsaturated fats in the human diet. So they're highly unstable. And so they can be oxidized easily. And if you flood your system with massive amounts that are physiologically unnatural, that you aren't going to get just from eating fish, so you take these concentrated fish oils, you may end up with more oxidation happening of these particular oils. Whereas when you're taking the algae, you're probably eating 200 or 300 milligrams when you have them, which is a more physiologically amount that we can actually deal with in our bodies. And so that's just another point to consider when people are saying, well, fish oil versus microalgae. The fish oil is going to be, fish is only as clean as the water it's swimming in, right? And fish oil, same thing. And so you're looking at some of these environmental contaminants that move up the food chain, whereas if you're growing, you're culturing algae, you're not raping the oceans, there's no environmental contaminants. So there are a lot of reasons to be choosing these over the fish oil supplements.
A little addition. You may want to read my book, Killer Fish. Brenda said a lot of incredibly important things. I think the most important was right at the end, where she said the oxidation. What we do know from good science and common sense, that fish oil, when it's extracted from the fish, even if you took a fish out of the water, squeeze the oil out of it, within 20 to 30 minutes, the oils become lipid peroxides. Write that down and look up what a lipid peroxide is. It's a known carcinogen. So all fish oil are known carcinogens. As you see in the Finnish studies, there's higher incidence of cancers in populations that consume more fish than the oil from fish. And the oceans are going to be fished out by the year 2050. 2048 is what all the scientists basically tell. So that point is, to me, the most important point. Because it's not that you say, well, I don't care, I'm a vegan. You better care. Because when the fish are not in the ocean, as Einstein said, fairly smart guy, he said 5 years after the fish are gone, the ecosystem's destroyed, the oxygen goes away, and guess what? We go away.